Hello, and welcome to another episode of Go Figure, my YouTube channel where I discuss the theory and practice of thorough bass. As J.S. Bach once said, thorough bass is the foundation of composition. This holds true not only for Baroque music, but also for later classical and romantic styles, which brings me to the topic of today's video: Emanuel Aloy Förster's practical examples from the year 1818. For simplicity, I'm going to drop the umlaut in this video and just call him Förster. Förster was a composer and pedagogue active in Vienna around the turn of the 18th century. He published these 31 exercises as an appendix to his treatise on thorough bass from 1805, which Beethoven actually encouraged Förster to publish. In fact, the two men enjoyed a close friendship, and Beethoven even sent many pupils to study with Förster. I hope this is enough to pique your interest in Förster's teachings. But if not, I've prepared 12 reasons why you should study Förster's exercises. First, they teach mostly via practical examples, not text. That is, these are not dry exercises for the desk, but music to be played and enjoyed. Second, Förster's given soprano line simplifies the thorough bass realization. This makes his exercises an excellent introduction to thorough bass for beginners, because you don't have to worry about what position to choose for the right hand. This relates to the third point, which is that his exercises teach the best position of the melody. Not all right hand positions are created equal, and Förster's exercises demonstrate what he considers to be the most beautiful position, or beste Lage in German, as he writes in the introduction. Fourth, they teach you to associate scale degrees with harmonies. Unlike most English language music theory today, Förster never mentions Roman numerals, but instead identifies the scale degrees of the bass line. With practice, you'll come to connect a bass scale degree in a certain context with a set of available figures or harmonies. Fifth, they start very simple and become very advanced. That is, Förster's exercises start easy enough for beginners and become complex enough for advanced students. Number 6, they build gradually in complexity. Each exercise grows in difficulty in relation to the last one, such that all 31 exercises create a more or less continuous pedagogical progression. Number 7, they lack ornamentation, making them relatively easy to play. Unlike Partimenti, which are exercises from the Italian tradition, Förster's exercises from the Viennese tradition contain no embellishments. You may consider this a detriment, but it certainly makes his exercises easier to play, which is a great advantage for beginners. Number 8, they teach you to think in any key if you transpose them. As Förster says in the preface, he particularly recommends that you transpose his exercises. This is by no means easy at first, but it is a time-tested, historically informed strategy for learning composition in this style. Number 9, they are historically appropriate for the music of around, say, 1750 to around 1850. This includes Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, but also later composers like Schumann, Mendelssohn, and Schubert, and countless others. Number 10, you'll internalize good voice leading with your hands. This, of course, relates to my first point, but it has more to do with the idea of developing good instincts, such that your hands begin to reach for the right chords without having to think about it too much. Number 11, Ludwig Holtmeier and many others recommend these exercises. Dr. Holtmeier is a distinguished music theorist and rector of the Music Conservatory in Freiburg, Germany. I taught in Freiburg from 2017 to 2019, which is where I first learned about Förster's exercises. You can hear Dr. Holtmeier discuss Förster in his interview on the Nikhil Hogan Show. See a link in the description. Finally, Beethoven valued Förster's teaching. As I mentioned already, Beethoven encouraged Förster to publish his thorough bass treatise in 1805. Later on, in 1818, Förster published these 31 exercises as an appendix to this treatise. He wrote in the preface that these are the kinds of exercises that he would give to his private students. This concludes the 12 reasons that you should study Förster's exercises. You'll be pleased to know that I've made a facsimile of Förster's original available for free on my website. But since it took me countless hours to create this edition, I've decided to sell it for $20. Here are 12 reasons you should buy my edition. First, I translated Förster's occasional commentary into English. The original is, of course, in German. Second, I've read his thorough bass treatise from 1805, and I supply historically appropriate solutions to his exercises. While I can't guarantee that my solutions reflect Förster's intentions precisely, I'm reasonably certain that they do. Third, my solutions enable you to work more independently, that is, without a teacher. This is easier, cheaper, and more flexible for you. Fourth, I give the exercises in both their original keys and in easier keys. Förster's his original exercises sometimes use up to 4, 5, or 6 accidentals. Beginners may prefer my edition, which also includes easier keys up to a maximum of 1 sharp or flat. Number 5, I analyze the key relationships in relation to the home key. This information is, of course, implicit in Förster's Arabic numerals for the scale degrees of the bass line, but it's still more convenient to be visually reminded that, for example, E minor is the key of the 3rd degree in relation to C major. Number 6, the modulations in my edition are much easier to see. Förster's original simply has a long string of Arabic numerals below the bass line, as we'll see in a minute. To highlight the key changes, I've given 2 analytical planes where every modulation jumps to another. I'll show this in a second. Number 7, I identify and analyze the cadences. If you can't recognize the cadences, Förster's exercises may seem a bit boring. The cadences help break up a very long, sometimes very long exercise into smaller phrases. That's why I include this analysis in my volume of solutions. Number 8, I identify the locations of the numerous sequences. Sequences play a central role in Förster's exercises, and I ensure you won't miss any of them. Number 9, I clarify the thorough bass figuring for beginners. In my experience, beginners of thorough bass have difficulty understanding that an isolated accidental refers to a 3rd above the bass, not the root. That's just one example of a difficulty that beginners sometimes face. To avoid confusion, I specify the intended figures in my volume with easier keys, which is intended for beginners. Number 10, my edition can be printed, used in a tablet, or projected in class if you're a teacher. While you'd have to print it yourself, paying for the printing costs, of course, having the PDF also has many advantages. Number 11, I will continue to update my edition as needed. I hope to have already found all of the typos, but in case I haven't, you'll get access to all future versions. And lastly, my modern edition is much easier to read. Here's the first page of the original. As you can see, the music is a bit small and sometimes difficult to read. And here's the first exercise in my edition. As you can see, it's much easier on the eyes. I also label the keys, as you can see, and every time that the scale degrees, the Arabic numerals, every time they jump over the dotted line, indicates a modulation. So those really pop out immediately visually. Here's what you get with your purchase. Volume 1.1, the original manuscript with Förster's suggestions, that is, his given soprano line and his occasional suggestions for inner voices. Volume 1.2, the original keys with solutions by me. Volume 2.1, the original manuscript with Förster's suggestions but transposed to easier keys. And lastly, Volume 2.2, easier keys with my solutions. If you're interested, here's how to purchase my edition. First, send $20, 20 US dollars, to derekremish@gmail.com via PayPal. Within 1 to 2 business days, you'll receive a link to a Google Drive folder with all 4 PDF files to download. I'd like to now give an overview of the organization of Förster's exercises. Exercises 1 through 7 use only 5/3 chords, or root position triads. Numbers 8 through 14 introduce 6/3 and 6/4 chords. Numbers 15 through 20 introduce dominant 7th chords. 21 through 25 employ enharmonic progressions. 26 through 29 introduce all the remaining kinds of 7th chords besides dominant 7th chords. Numbers 30 and 31 use 7/2 and 9/7 chords. And finally, at the end there are 2 extra exercises that I added from the end of Förster's thorough bass treatise from 1805. And just in case you're completely new to thorough bass, here's a brief overview about figuring. A sharp, flat, or natural refers to the note a third above the bass, not a third above the root. A slash raises a figure by a chromatic half step. If there's no figure over a bass note, add the octave 5th and 3rd above the bass. To a 6th, you add 8/3, 6/3, or 3/3, depending on the situation. To 6/4, you add 8. To 6/5, you add 3. To a 2, you add 6/4. To a 4 with a slash, meaning a chromatically raised 4th, you add 6 and 2. To 4/3, you add 6. To 7, you add 5/3. And finally, to 7/2, you add 4. Now, all this may seem overwhelming at first, but you don't have to memorize it right now. The main thing to know is that these all refer to intervals over the bass, not the root. Förster covers almost all this information in his exercises, but if you need an overview, you can always refer back here, or see the free materials on my website. See the link in the description. Finally, I'll conclude this video with some advice on how to use Förster's exercises. First, begin by playing and transposing the 2 exercises on page 49 into a few other keys. This will be an easy introduction into Förster's style of realization, where there are always 3 notes on the right and the bass line in the left. Don't worry about playing these 2 exercises in other right-hand positions, as Förster suggests. Second, always add precisely 2 inner voices. That is, maintain 4 strict voices throughout. You'll begin with Förster's 2 given outer voices, and you'll add 2 inner voices of your own, making 4 total. This means you'll need to show unison doublings rather than dropping a voice, going to 3 instead of 4. Keep the upper 3 voices in close position, except on 6 chords where it's possible to spread out the middle voices a bit in order to avoid parallels. When you start a new exercise, play through the bass line and even sing with it while you're playing. This will help you to recognize sequences. This is helpful because generally a sequential bass passage should have sequential upper voices as well. Next, look at which interval Förster supplies in the given soprano line and add the missing intervals in close position to the soprano. Then play your realization until you are satisfied with it. Only after you can play it should you write out your middle voices. Writing out the middle voices will help you check your solution for parallel fifths and octaves. Next, practice until you can play each exercise slowly, steadily, and under control. Say, at least around quarter note equals 60, but you could also play faster. The key here is to think before you do. This way you'll build good habits, and over time you'll hardly have to think at all. You may also wish to try avoiding looking at your hands too often. Instead, feel the keys with your fingers and keep your eyes mostly on the solutions. Finally, transpose your solution, or a few phrases thereof, a step up or down without writing it out, just looking at your solution. Use the contour of the outer voices and the scale degrees of the bass as your guides. As already mentioned, transposition is an invaluable exercise for composers because it trains you to recognize voice-leading phenomena in different contexts. This, in turn, helps you internalize voice-leading patterns and apply them in varied forms in varied situations. This includes adding ornamentation, which is a topic not covered in Förster's exercises because they focus on harmony. That's it for this video. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Go Figure.